we so wish you would honor people's time. Oh, okay. Thank you for that consideration, Lucy. It was custom for us to give a little bit of a buffer and start at 4:03. But I hear you, and we can consider starting a little bit early, but I worry that we've missed people. So thank you so much for offering that. My name is Sarah DeSilvi. I am the Director of Terminology for the Gravity Project. Insofar as current attendees, I believe I know most of you. If you wouldn't mind putting your name and your organization of reference into the chat so that we can log it for the purposes of the minutes, that would be great. And welcome to our special summer session, focusing on program enhancements across 3 different topic areas, and we're so excited that you're here. This is, again, the Gravity Project Terminology Public Call, and we're ready to go. And next slide. We welcome and thank you all for joining. We usually ask everyone to mute upon entry, just because we want to make sure that we're focused and don't have any background noise. It's really important to note that every call is recorded and then posted on the Confluence for reference. We also post slides now in advance of the meeting for your review prior. These are already posted on the Confluence, and Sarah Bahal put a link in the chat. You're encouraged to actively participate in the discussion via the chat, and I will try and include those comments. And just as elevated by Lucy, I cannot discern easily as I'm trying to facilitate when comments are sent to either me personally or so. Please just send everything to the group, and I will do my best to elevate it. And then if there's any thoughts you want to have after the fact, please, you can always send us an email to gravityproject@hl7.org. Next slide. So this is our common antitrust practices slide. This is just a general statement that Gravity Project participants have the responsibility to fully comply with federal and state antitrust laws. And so we just note this at the beginning. This is part of our, our approach to maintaining and aligning with ANSI certifications. So everyone who's part of Gravity is well accustomed to this, but we just make sure that everyone knows that adherence to antitrust practices involves not only avoidance of antitrust violations, but avoidance of any behavior that might be construed as such. Next slide. There's a lot of Sarah on here, but hopefully it's not just Sarah, because this is as a kickoff. The point is to have a collective understanding of what we will be doing over the course of the next months ahead. And we have a lot of subject matter experts on the call, so we're very grateful for all of your attendance. We'll be going through the welcome overview just briefly in case there's any new members, and then we'll be kicking off our 3-topic area program enhancement work, focusing kind of level setting on one of the areas, which is specifically program classification, and then we'll close with community homework and next steps. Any questions on the agenda? All right, next slide. Next slide. We are trying to build a more intelligent and thoughtful way to engage in Gravity information. And so we have a new method of communicating via emails. And so it's really important that we get everyone's email preferences in order to make sure you're getting the information you desire. You can select information generally, you can select it by work stream. We recognize that this initiative happened after we sunset the last terminology public call. We do not have very many respondents in the terminology workstream. We have lots of people who maintain an awareness of terminology because of domains might come up that interest them. So if you have not already done so, please update your email preference at the link, and Sarah Bahal put it in the chat. And indicate which Gravity Project communications you wish to receive across our 3 work streams. And it's really important. You matter to us, your engagement matters to us. We want to make sure you're receiving communications that you want in order to stay engaged in the collective work. And we also want to make sure you're not receiving emails that aren't relevant to you anymore. And thank you so much for this. And we hope to get as many responses as we can to make sure our community is engaged. Next slide. Just general announcements, the CMS Connect-a-thon's coming up. There is a Gravity track of reference. There is both the track with the with the IG, and then also I'm doing a gravity terminology kind of office hours approach. This is July 16th through 18th. The registration is closed, but it is a free connect-a-thon, and please come and join our track if you want to learn more and engage in gravity. We always invite people to the technical workstream meetings Wednesdays from 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time, and then the implementation workstream is revolving topics on everything implementation. So we just talked about outcomes, both terminology and tech to support outcomes reporting. Our next affinity work group on July 25th is really a summary of resources, existing open resources to support documentation, implementation of gravity deliverables, including resources we've drafted and authored and other ones in the ecosystem. It is important that they are open source and able to be shared. So we are not going to be elevating proprietary solutions you have to pay for. If there's an open shared resource that your entities have developed in order to assist with documenting or implementing gravity resources, please let us know. So that's the highlight of our next meeting, because we realize we've done a lot and the ecosystem continues to move along, and we want to make sure that we have the resources everyone needs. Again, this is the last Thursday of the month, so it's July 25th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time. Any questions on that? All right, okay, next slide. Oh, I already asked any questions. I think we're good. Any questions? Any more questions? Okay, next slide. Just quick high-level overview. There are some new members on the call, and I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of this. Our workstream meetings tend to be a little bit smaller than our implementation meetings. So welcome to the group, and we're really glad you're here. Gravity is a collaborative initiative with the goal to develop consensus-driven data standards to support the collection, use, and exchange of data to address the social determinants of health. Next slide. We are very, very grateful for our project sponsors, members, and partners. We would not be able to do what we do without you all. This is a new slide that highlights the different tiers of support across our Premier, Partner, Associate, and Designated memberships. A note from our social justice perspective, we do designate members to be part of all of our governance that we feel are really critical for representing the social care ecosystem. This is unique to us from, again, working from our social justice perspective, but we really couldn't do it without all of our sponsors and members, and we are so grateful for all of you. And there's lots of in-kind support too across CMS, the American Medical Association, and Civitas. So just again, thanks so much for all of you. We are in a much better stead than we were a little bit ago for all of your support. If you want to become a sponsor, send an email to gravityproject@ehl7.org and we will rope you in. Next slide. Just a base reminder of our project use cases, the core use cases that drive our work. One of the principal ones is documenting social care data at patient-client encounters. To drive that use case, this is the terminology work stream. We are the language makers. Over the course of our work, we've developed language that we'll talk about a little bit in a few further slides, but we are the makers of the language to meet that initial use case. The next use case is tracking social care interventions to completion. This is when we start to leverage both the terminology and standards of exchange in our implementation guide. And the third, really critical for the goal of health equity, is gathering and aggregating social care data uses for uses beyond the point of care. We work from a social justice framework and health equity framework. We align ourselves with the World Health Organization and HHS, which all note that addressing social drivers / social determinants requires structural interventions in policy. This is why that Capitol building is their icon. And you can't get there without data aggregation. So those are the 3 use cases that drive everything we do at Gravity. And there's many more use cases that have come out of recent work, but these are the original core use cases that kicked us off in 2019. Next slide. Just a lexicon. Again, we are terminologists here. We are language makers. So before we get into the work, it's important to ground ourselves in the what of what we're doing. So health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. This opportunity statement is really critical. It aligns with the literature of health equity, the fundamental work of Amartya Sen, or the papers of the World Health Organization, so that capacity to achieve equity. Social determinants of health, also interchangeably used with social drivers. It's literally the same concept, just a different name. is the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age, and they're shaped by the distribution of money, power, and resources, hence the need for structural or policy solutions. Really important to note that SDOH can offer both positive and negative forces. They're not just risks. And one of the things that I said in a meeting the other day, and one of our dear program manager, Vanessa, heard it, is none of us are the sum total of just our risks, right? We are the balance of protective factors and risks, and that is how we affect ourselves within the world. And so protective factors are the characteristics or strengths of individuals, families, communities, or societies that act to mitigate risk and promote positive well-being and healthy development. I am family practice as a daily practice, and so working with children and families, enhancing protective factors is a critical facet of everything I do. Negative forces are social risks. They're the adverse social conditions associated with poor health. And then we follow this lexicon, really written by one of our founders, Laura Gottlieb of Siren, which is referenced in the link below. Which social risks are those things that risk identified, but social needs is when they're patient prioritized. And you can see this language weaving throughout everything that we do. So just wanted to make sure we all grounded that before we go further. Next slide. These are our 3 work streams: the terminology work stream, the language makers, here we are, and sometimes language organizers, which we'll see work on that very shortly. Technical work stream, which is the SDOH CCIG and that standard of exchange. We communicate in the middle through the value sets that we develop in VSAC to support standard implementation of that exchange. And then there's all of the testing and implementation and dissemination that goes on the implementation work stream. All of the information of all of these is available on the Confluence. Next slide. This is our timeline. It is very dense. We are going to have to get it on 2 slides, maybe. We have done a lot of work over the course of our inception. So we were kicked off really from an exploratory meeting in 2017 that I had the honor of attending in DC, trying to figure out how to address the critical need for data standards to address the social determinants of health. Our first domain was food insecurity in 2019, and since then we've addressed 20 domains. We have our roadmap over the course of the next few years, possible domains set ahead of us. There's going to be a lot of work over the course of the next few years, and we're grateful for all of that. In 2019, we also became an HL7 Fire Accelerator, really underwritten by the critical need to address standards in this space. So we have our accompanying SDOH CCIG, which is that standard of exchange, and we're entering in a update of that we've been working on the technical teams and working on an update to that over the last weeks. So we've addressed all of these 20 domains, and then we're looking forward to the fall when we'll keep on going. Next slide. This is our 2024 roadmap. So you can see we addressed just utility and security in the spring. And usually we sunset for periods of build, dissemination, and evaluation. Everything green is kind of the area of terminology. But we really addressing and leaning into needs driven by implementation. We have the special project we're going to be talking about today, which is really about program enhancements, both program classification and leaning into opportunities to enhance our intervention terminology. And in the fall, we are looking forward to addressing 2 domains. Our pattern should be going forward, at least 2 domains every single session, our August to November session and our February to June session, and looking at language barriers and history of legal involvement in incarceration. These are, again, both elevated for implementation. So we are at the point now where our implementers are telling us what we need to do next, and that our members are prioritizing that. We are still working on new use cases, really driven both from implementation and from our social care voice co-design project. And so that is more to come on that. And then we head into our next Connectathon. This is the dark blue, and we're working on our next update for the IG. And again, implementation work stream, that's that light blue. That's the next meeting on resources. So this is the green is terminology. Purple is just exploratory, dark blue is technology, and then the light blue is implementation. Hi, Lucy. Yes?
Did you say social care voice? What is that?
Oh, yes. So last year in the summer, supported by Robert Wood Johnson, we hosted a co-design project called the Social Care Voice Co-Design Project. That report is on our Confluence. One of the most important things that came out of that was identification of new use cases that were elevated by our social care partners. And the full report, the rationale, all of that is located on the Confluence.
Thank you for reminding us. I knew about the activity, but I hadn't given it that label. So for a lot of
yeah.
people here, that may help. Thanks.
Yes, that is the name of the report, and maybe we can pull it into the links just to remind everybody. It's amazing to see that report in its legs. It's gone all over the place, right? But we definitely use it to center ourselves in the use cases. Many of the domains that we are, many of the rationale for prioritizing our domains comes from that report as well. And really critically, we got a lot of new designated members from that project, recognizing voices that we needed to have in our organization from a governance perspective. So it was good. It was a really good summer spent last year. Any other questions on the roadmap? All right, and you can see the members of the co-design project in the report. And we had this broad, the whole rationale of why people were selected and what they represented. It's all in there. It's a very dense report. It's really dense, but legible. There's a lot of fruit in there. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're getting close. Next slide. All right, lastly, we cannot proceed with any new work without grounding ourselves in our principles. We work from a social justice and data justice framework that requires that we level set on principles. And so because we are a new initiative doing new work, we had to create our own principles to guide it. These are the 6 principles that we integrate into everything we do: improving personal health outcomes, improving population health equity, ensuring personal control, designing appropriate solutions, ensuring accountability, and preventing, reducing, and remediating harm. The intent is to weave these into everything. So we were just having conversations with the technical work stream a little bit ago, about a month ago, and there were questions being raised by a very, a really amazing involved community. We were able to reference these again about Gravity's position on them. So these principles really should be fundamental in everything we do. Please hold us the account, fifth bullet, ensuring accountability. Please collectively, let's hold ourselves accountable to the principles as well. If you have any concerns about us adhering to them, just let us know, because it's the intent that we actually follow them faithfully. Any questions on the principles? Yes, exactly, Lucy. Next slide. Okay, that was we had our welcome announcements, Gravity intro, in case there were any new members. And I believe actually some of our subject matter experts, although they're members, or actually not all of them are members, but they, some of it you might not have ever seen that overview. So it was good to get to. And so we're going to head into the work of the day, which is going to kick off. So it's really a community orientation into the work ahead. And then next meeting, we'll come back and start showing deliverables for community assessment and engagement. Next slide. Okay, the Gravity is just about, we are publishing our process paper, which is the way we as a collective identify and curate terminology solutions. And so that's going to come onto the Confluence shortly. But Gravity has a very formal process, even if we work in consensus and community to our work, and it's partly why we're so trusted. So the phase we're going into with program enhancements is one of terminology identification, because it's one of identifying opportunities. And then eventually we will work on reviewing the things we found and go into vote. And so this is the terminology identification phase, and this is why this slide is here. Next slide. This is the process that's part of the paper. So the Gravity terminology curation process, those of you who have been on terminology meetings before have seen this slide, but it's important to ground the work that we're doing here. So it's usually a formal 6-month cycle. I don't know if the enhancements work will take that long. I do not think it will. But the formal 6-month cycle kicks off in August and runs to November, as mentioned on the roadmap, and then again in February to June. You all are a critical part of that. It is always grounded by subject matter expertise, and because we reference the evidence, and then it's always open to the public, and here you all are. We follow consensus-based principles. We ensure a consensus vote. And then we have a period where we work to make sure that we can enable the solutions the community has identified. But this is, again, our formal process, and the paper describing this process should be available by the end of the summer on the Confluence, and you'll see yourselves all in it. Next slide. The example of what we build is here. And again, it's a little bit different in this case, but you can see encoded instruments and LOINC, diagnoses in ICD-10-CM and STEMMED CT, goal statements, and importantly for this work, interventions. So our work this summer is all in the area of intervention enhancements, enhancing the ways that we structure and classify our programs in order to assist with navigation and connection to services, assessing the sufficiency of our programs, and then also trying to figure out whether we can collectively learn how to document them well. Lucy?
Yeah, sorry to keep interrupting constantly, but it seems to me that interventions needs its own circle. HCPCS, NOBED, CPT are not interventions, they are recording devices. Interventions, to me, is a much broader concept and eventually, potentially results in policy work. So I'm just suggesting that interventions begin with the data we produce, but go way beyond the data we produce, potentially, in principle, in theory, and hopefully in practice.
You know, Lucy, that makes me think about the work we were talking about regarding outcomes. I think I'll just need to sit with you a little bit to try, I think, to better understand, because I'm always happy to better understand. But I think what I hear you talking about a little bit is like outcomes analysis.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about interventions, political, social, and economic,
okay, what you're saying.
to improve the structure within which health status occurs and evolves. That's what I think about when I see the word interventions.
I hear what you're saying
What
there.
are you thinking about when you use that term? Maybe that's the question.
Well, yeah, so the way we've structured interventions at this time is the things that we do to help people in clinical and social care and like spaces. And I hear you talking about, maybe what I hear you talking about more appropriately is the areas of policy, which we certainly, you know, the Social Care Voice Co-Design Project has a really good bubble call out for that. And there's some unpacking of interventions. But a little bit deeper, maybe we can talk about that further. But at this, it's meant to be like there's a person in the center of this wheel, and we're trying to help them. We're helping them by identifying concerns, assessing concerns with their consent, creating goals, and then either referring them to help or directly providing them resources.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Next slide. And then we have the value sets we curated. The update now is 240 plus. So gravity across those 4 core activities, and there are emerging activities, stewards over 240 National Library of Medicine value sets. Huge thanks to the Terminology team for the June update of the VSAC value sets. We update our value sets at a very formal structure in June and December in order to align with coding standard releases, and the updates to the Confluence are ready for all of your use, and thank you to the Terminology team for doing so. Lots of work. When the lights go out at the end of a domain, we shift into a whole other area of work, which is just trying to support, the maintenance and curation of the resources for implementation that all of you need to have. Next slide. Oh no sorries ever. This is a very high level schedule. We do try to do schedules for all of our work. We're here at the kickoff. That's the star. Sorry, the call out's in the wrong area. The language varies, history of legal involvement in incarceration. It moved up somehow. It should be on August 8th is when we kick off our regular domains. Sorry, if we can go back one slide. We are trying to figure out whether the uniqueness of the program enhancement work requires an additional meeting or a separate meeting. And really also to give space for working on 2 domains in our normal classic process, more to come on that. But this summer, we're just focusing on program enhancements, and we'll talk about those next 3 topic areas next. Next slide. Okay. Whew, all the background work. That took a long time. And now we're going to get into the work at hand. Again, because this is a kickoff, I want to make sure that all of you feel like you understand the work at hand and that we address questions. So please raise your hand. We're not actually delivering materials today. Deliverables and presentation of materials doesn't start until the next meeting. But the point of a kickoff is to understand what we're doing and why. And then we hit the ground running in 2 weeks with our first presentation of findings. So the title of the series of work that we're doing, really driven again by implementer needs, is called Program Enhancements, and slowly you will see why. Enhancements is the word we use at Gravity when we are improving on what we have already made, right? Through implementer feedback, right? And you'll see the evidence of this as we go forward. Next slide. These are the 3 topic areas. Gravity terminology public call is usually on pause in the summer, as I mentioned. We usually take the summer and just work on build and value set maintenance and submissions, just to to standard terminology organizations. But we are responding to opportunities to evolve and enhance our program terminology across a couple different areas, and leveraging our consensus process to support implementer needs. And so we're convening these special early sessions to kick off 3 topic areas and support the consensus review of the work we're doing and have been doing. So program term analysis, program classification, and program documentation are the 3 topic areas. Program term analysis is really a desire to get stakeholder review of Gravity program types and definitions for completeness, and understanding that not all social care experts are able to attend these meetings, or nor have they attended them over the course of our 5 years. We are going to have, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. Program classification is the development of an open consensus program classification of Gravity programs for the purposes of navigation and connection. We have not thought in this lens up until this time. We have a lot of programs that we've defined consensus through our process, and we're just working on classifying them in a way that's helpful. And then program documentation is leveraging this special session and the attendees who are a little bit different than our normal terminology calls to develop consensus on method for documenting service delivery and program enrollment, right? So we've developed all kinds of program concepts. And so these 3 areas are enhancing those program concepts or enhancing those intervention concepts across these 3 topics. And we'll go into a little bit more of them about what they mean in the next slides. These are the 3 different areas: program term analysis, program classification, and program documentation, all under the heading of program enhancements. Next slide. Thank you, Jonathan, for the comment. So program term analysis. So Gravity, you all, us, our collective, right? Over the course of our 20 domains of reference, thinking about the interventions that are critical for each domain, have developed a set of 200 plus evidence-based and defined programs. That's a lot, right? So to ensure these terms are sufficient to represent social care programs that are important to the ecosystem, we're basically doing a comprehensive review. So we're going to be sending a PDF of programs and definitions to select social care stakeholders like critical leaders, national leaders in direct provision of care, and with the intent that they review and reply with comments on any missing program. And as you all know, anyone who's been involved in terminology knows that any missing program suggestion has to be coupled by a cited definition and note of relevant social risk domains. You can't just say you're missing this program. You have to say you're missing this program. This is the citation, and it applies to these domains. We also want to use this opportunity, again, leaning into what we heard from our social care voice co-design project, what we're hearing from our members, to have those same entities document programs that are critical for social care and payer reimbursement partnerships or grantor partnerships. Anytime a program is not underwritten by federal dollars, is reimbursed for within novel partnerships, is not coming out of under normal operating funds for a CBO, we want to know, right? Because those are program types that will lead into trying to figure out how to support as we work to develop reimbursement terminology. Yeah, so Lucy, yes, we are directly reaching out to the entities involved in the social care voice co-design project. Nail head, well done. We're going to be sending the list in July and giving entities a lot of time because we understand the experts in this work are busy taking care of people, right? And so we do not want to have them respond quickly. And so we're also not in a rush because it's a comprehensive overview and we already have a good base set. So we'll be getting respondents, we're getting responses back within the middle and Tuesday, October 1st. And then our work at Gravity will be to understand and parse all the suggestions. And then those suggestions will become part of our spring 2025 work, right? Because they still have to go through the hopper. It's just that the community is going to give suggestions over the course of the summer and fall, and then we'll integrate it into our 2025 consensus work. Any questions on this? This is, again, really just making sure that we're responding to social care voice experts who may or may not see their program or the programs they use to help entities in our program list. We're working with them on the survey language, Lucy, and we're also having one-on-ones. The same process we use to ensure access and understanding and co-design is applying to this project. I promise. All right, any other questions? All right, okay, now on to the next topic. Next topic is program classification. In brief, we're gonna go more into it later. So the purpose of program classification is to organize existing Gravity programs into an open consensus classification that can support navigation and connection to services. The process very closely mirrors, although the timeline might be condensed, our normal terminology curation process. So we have pre-work, we'll talk more about that, where subject matter experts suggest consensus method for initial classifications. They're analyzing capacity to represent the classification and standards, and we're documenting requirements and drivers that may not be met by any initial classification. We're doing something new, so we're going to make sure that we document whether or not our solutions meet multiple purposes. And then you will be involved in community review. We're doing this. We started in May. We'll run through August, maybe September. It might not take that long, probably will. But more on that, hold space for that in a second. We're going to be coming back to this in depth after the next slide. I just want to note, though, before we get into this, and we're going to repeat this later, that our SMEs are different this time. When we usually do terminology work for domains, we ensure that we have published experts in the domains of reference, experts in psychometrics and measuring the program, experts in the interventions for the program, for the domain. In this instance, we are leaning upon experts who are experts in developing classifications, right? So it's unique. And then we also are going to be leaning on experts who are experts in representing classifications and standards. One thing of note is that existing Gravity programs are the foundation of the structure, so that we're making sure it's within scope. More on that in a second. Next slide. Program documentation, again, because many of the entities, again, you're going to see, we're just kicking off, but there's a lot of entities who are going to be helping us assess the fitness of the classification, who work in the documentation and vendor space, in the care management space, right? The users of classifications are the same people who document the existence of programs in patient and client records. One of the things that we've long recognized at Gravity is that we need to develop consensus pathways for documenting that a thing exists for a patient or client. We have med lists. I have a list of a patient's durable medical equipment. We do not have a similar list of the social care programs that our patients are engaged in that are supporting them. A list of things like SNAP or WIC or Meals on Wheels or having a housing choice, a HUD housing choice voucher, like those critical programs that we engage people in that are important to understand what we need to do next and the supports our patients have. So we'll be leveraging this community and all of the unique members of the community who are coming to help us with this to sort through that and sort through considerations. And I just put some considerations here. These are things we've talked about before. Our precedent is to kind of pre-coordinate everything, enrollment and SNAP, right? But we also are going to be leveraging and creating program type terms for the classification, and we might just be able to use that. We'll figure it out. But we're all going to be doing that work together in this space over the course of the next months. And forgive me, it is still the remnants of Hurricane Beryl here. It is pouring. I don't know if you can hear it, but there were tornadoes yesterday. It's flooding all over Vermont. It's quite intense up here. But if you have a hard time hearing me because the rain is too loud, because I have a hard time hearing myself, my apologies.
We can't hear it. You're good.
Yay. Okay. It's loud out there. It is intense. Okay. Next slide. All right. Any questions on those 3 topic areas? Topic areas of program type analysis, leveraging those who deliver direct social care, building off the experts of the Social Care Voice Co-Design Project. Program classification, we're going to go into more into that now. And then really trying to lean into a pathway to documenting programs in records. And this includes social care records, this includes electronic health records, this includes community referral platforms. Like how do we say a person has engagement in a thing that matters? And I say this specifically just before we go on. We know that these programs are so fundamental to stability, like food stamps or SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is called the SNAP vaccine. Because it is so important in stabilizing families' economic status that if you can just get an older individual or a household engaged in SNAP, and understand sometimes the SNAP threshold is so poor that people don't get very much money, but statistically we say, and we know, that if you get them engaged in SNAP, everything else settles. They have more money to afford utilities, they have more money for housing, things happen. They also qualify for eligibility for other programs just by proving that. So just know that this documentation is critical for all kinds of reasons. Now we're going to get into program classification. Our SMEs are on the line, and I think probably we'll have time for, we're actually doing a pretty good job using up all of our time, and then we'll have questions and then come back next week, really specifically leaning into program classification over the course of the next meetings. Next slide. This is an adaptation I made to the curation process specifically for this purpose because it's a little bit different. So lots of things are the same. You'll see from the next slides, we have been meeting diligently with subject matter experts for a long time, working on developing internal agreement and subject matter expert consensus and understanding requirements for this work. Here we are now in our identify process, which is going to probably merge with our end-to-end review process, which is this open community convening where we vet the things that we are crafting with the community. Again, many of our subject matter experts couldn't leverage their vast communities of users to this meeting, but they're coming in the next couple of weeks. So then in the next meeting that we have, you're going to see hopefully lots of new voices. Because when you see our subject matter experts, you're going to know that they're calling their users of classifications. So that we can make sure that the classification that we're building is fit for use, for functional use. We'll go more into that in a second. There will likely be some submissions to standards and coding systems after the consensus vote. That vote's still going to happen. And then we're going to have to figure out how to publish the classification and more on that very shortly. But it is essentially the same pathway because this is our consensus process at Gravity, evidence-based, public, formal. But a little bit different than the normal way, just because it's kind of a different thing. Next slide. All right, this is the same slide we had before, just refreshing. No information, I already reviewed it. So the process, the SMEs, next slide. Okay, we're now going to go a little bit more in depth. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone understands the work that we've done so far and the subject matter experts that we've gathered so far. Our subject matter experts are jointly recognized as experts in authoring social care program classifications. We only have one missing one, right? So our present subject matter experts who've been working since May, and thank you so much, are 211LA. Oh, sorry, if we can go back. 2-in-1 LA, who are the authors and curators of 2-in-1 HSIS, which many in the social care ecosystem are well aware of. Find Help, Epic, Unite Us, and then we have 2-in-1 San Diego, who all of you on the call might know. And those entities right now are experts in how, well, they have crafted and curate and maintain classifications for the purposes of navigation and connection across decades, right? So our evidence is unique when we think about that purpose. So they have made classifications, they've employed classifications, they have refined them over the course of time with user feedback, and we're trying to see if we can create a consensus open classification fit for this navigation and connection purpose. We are integrating United Way Worldwide into that SME group, hopefully. And that will be, again, another entity that has developed a social care program classification and has curated it over time. The process is we've been meeting weekly since May 16th to first agree on requirements, then analyze existing classifications. And we are currently synthesizing classifications. We're defining rules for the structure, the why of how we're synthesizing. And we are crafting an initial classification that will come back to you all. So the pre-work has taken a little bit longer than usual because what we're doing is new and it's really hard. I'm just gonna note, and I say this in our weekly meetings, like what we're doing is new and it's hard, right? So each of these entities have crafted a unique classification of their own, and we're trying to synthesize wisdom, right? And so agreeing on requirements took time, analyzing existing classifications took time, synthesizing the classifications took time, and defining rules and crafting the initial classification also takes time. Do any of our SMEs want to comment on this pre-work phase? Because this has all been behind the scenes, and maybe you have something to say that could help. I'm not trying to put any of you on the spot, but you're all here. If you want to say anything regarding the pre-work, here's your moment.
I can just say, I'm so psyched and glad we're getting to do this, only because I think, like, as the CIE, I know on here it's 2-in-1 San Diego, but really it's very much from the CIE lens that we're kind of participating in this. And, you know, the Gravity's project's goals is to enable interoperability to better knit together our systems of care. And I think there are a lot of things that, I know in my own personal, like, interoperability goals, we've encountered the need to be able to, how do we talk about what is in the community that people are accessing, what they're trying to access, all these different things. And so it has been this need that I think we're finally getting to, and I'm really excited that we get to do this together and in this space, because I think Gravity has like good processes for that. But it's very hard because these concepts are used in a lot of different functions and in a lot of different ways. And so there's a level of, I think, holding many things together in the work that we're about to set on doing. And so I think it's, I'm glad that we're finally here.
Sorry. I didn't see, my apologies, Lucy. I didn't actually see the first comment. So the question you asked was about whether AAA agencies are participating. They are not the makers of classifications. And we work very closely with ACL like on this approach, but they are 100% going to be involved in the use, right? So we have the subject matter experts who are the crafters of the classifications. And then we have all of the entities that are critical to making sure that it's fit for purpose, right? And so they are coming in force, you know, and we're leveraging all resources to ensure that those who use the classification come to bear when it comes to the consensus process. I also want to note that classifications are built for specific purposes. This one is built for navigation and connection to services that can be organized for different reasons. And one of the most important things that I don't know if I even put here, and my apologies, was that because our classification that we're creating in Gravity by design, and because of our scope, is going to be underwritten and supported by standard terminologies, it allows it to be referenced by and mapped to other classifications that are crafted for other purposes. So this is actually meeting multiple needs at once, right? Because you know, some of the classifications that the subject matter experts create are like proprietary, and you need a license for them, so they're not open. And some of them are not, right? But if we have terminology to support the classification we're crafting, and terminology to support every program type, it doesn't like matter necessarily, because our classification can map to alternate classifications. So I didn't put that in the slides, but I'm going to state that. And then I don't know if any SME wants to say anything more on that. But users of the classification were that critical entity that I mentioned earlier, right? So if you are a user of a classification, understanding of its fit for purpose is really critical. And that comes in, and this is why the consensus process is so important. Okay, anything else? Our services, part of what we... Yeah, so if you look at so the master programs and professions list that Gravity has created that defines and underwrites this work includes all different types of programs, like services. And even we were trying to figure out whether, like, what is a service and what is a program early. Elena could testify. But if, you know, the part of this is we will publish to the Confluence the collective list of the master programs and professions list. It'll be in the resources for this work, and we'll show you where. And everyone can see all the different types of things that are in there. Even people, even roles are in there, and organizations are in there. There's a lot. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how we classify ourselves. Like, how do we classify what 211 does, right? Because for the purposes of navigation and connection, you might need to classify, you might need to have a way to navigate to and connect to that service that 211 provides. Anyway, more to come on that. Any questions on this? I'm sure lots of questions. It'll make sense as we go along. The area on the Confluence is blooming, and these slides, of course, will be available in meeting materials as we go forward. Any other questions? Any other SME comments? I think we're doing good. Again, bold, brave SMEs working in this space, new horizons. Next slide. This is a really important level set. We talked a lot about this this morning. The evidence in this work is different. It's a little different. And again, Lucy, this is where you know, we think about users and how important the users are. The evidence is the functional structure of classification, of the classification. Does it work, right? And so the evidence at hand is the functional structure of the existing classifications, because all of them have been modified by users over time to aid in navigation and connection to services. Decades, right? So the evidence is not a paper on the domains of utility and security. The evidence is not a citation from Administration of Community Living on what LIHEAP is. We just do utility and security, so it's fresh. The evidence in this instance is the functional structure. So how we engage as a community, this is why it's going to be a little bit different representation, are people who use the classification, use classifications and the functional structure of the classification. That is the evidence that has to be weighed when we're making adaptations, or developing the classification and making any adaptation to it, right? Does that make sense? Is that we have to consider that as the evidence in order to proceed with this work. Does that make sense? These classifications have been built for functional purposes. They have worked for some time. Comments need to be about the function of the classification and need to be weighed against the evidence of the existing classifications. Those bold people coming together and merging. And surprisingly, that seems like it's landing. It's a shift for us, right? So it's different than concepts. It's different than this doesn't feel like a this, so it might be a this. It's like these things have been working. This is the synthesis of those things. People who use these kinds of things, please give us feedback. It's gonna be fun. I have a whole new area of my brain that I am building in order to assist with even moderately facilitating this work. Any SME thoughts on this before we go forward? No, I think we're good.
Well, the only thing I will tell you is that.
Oh,
Under-
hello.
Hi, Meryl from 211 LA, that under the 211 HISIS, you would find 211 or information and referral under information services.
Yeah.
Which is a second level. The first level would be organizational, community, international services. So, there's definitely a category for every type of service.
I love it.
Yeah.
Maribel, I love that you came back. So Maribel is responding to what I've mentioned regarding the uniqueness of classifying ourselves, and Maribel, being Maribel from 211 LA and 211 HSAS, just gave us the classification that I mentioned with possibly novel, but she's like, no, it's not. It's right here. Thank you.
And classification goes, way beyond just interventions or trying to get to a common standard for how to assist a client, because, classification also helps us group the reasons that people are calling in for, the types of service gaps there might be, and this all kinds of work that requires linking back to the classification systems that we're going to be identifying as the standard, right? So it's really important to understand that it's a multidimensional usage for classification, not just for the services that are going to be provided to a client.
Thank you. And there's a little bit of talk about alternate uses, but nothing as smart as what Maribel just said. Janice, any questions?
No, I just wanted to comment that this is really important, because when I talk about social drivers, social res, STO, whatever the terms, it's all over the place. How, each organization, like if I talk to a higher level individual, they'll say, oh, well, we have our own, right? And so drawing all this together is really important. But I do think that having a standard across the board might be challenging, because it's just totally different language in some parts of the US than in other parts. So, that's something that could happen. Anyway, thank you.
The great thing about Gravity Standards is they're live because we make them together. And this is Enhancements project too, right? So and again, each of the classifications that the SMEs represent are live as well, and are responded to by community feedback. So hopefully we'll figure out a path forward, driven by the specific purpose and to enable other classifications for other purposes. All right. Thank you so much, SMEs, for coming. Again, I get an education every single time I talk to these individuals. Again, I'm very careful to say, I am not an expert in classification of things. Nope, I'm a namer. But I'm not a classifier. I guess in some sense, we classify some things, but this is, again, I sit with heroes and experts and leaders in this work with our subject matter experts, and just so grateful. Next slide. These are just some things that we've already agreed on. So one of the notion that first bullet was an agreement on what we first did when we just met is like, what are we agreeing that we're doing, right? We literally had to sit together and be like, what are the requirements we're working to? So we know we're building it for the purposes of navigation and connection. We also know that we've confirmed these things. We're going to be creating an open USCDI line classification of social care programs, categories, and social care programs for the purposes of navigation and connection. And this is really important, to services by health and social care providers and people who are self-navigating, right? So some deployments of the classification might be just a person using the classification to find things on their own, right? So it can't be so jargony or confusing that you can't self-navigate. And it's intended to be able to be used by multiple entities, not just health entities, social care providers as well. So this is what we know as well. And this is clearly our lane at Gravity with the Open USCDI aligned. We also know that we're going to be codifying concepts for programs that are clearly defined and readily available in code systems like Snowman and Loink, and interoperable. This is really important because what I just mentioned, even if some of our SMEs host and curate, national, licensed classifications, if we build terminology to support the program, we'll be able to collectively leverage interoperability across different classifications for different purposes. And this is again, goes back, Marty Bell set this up perfectly. We also want to note that the codified concepts that we're making are able to be leveraged for other uses in directories, and possibly facilitate documentation of service provision and enrollment, right? Just like I mentioned in the program enrollment, whatever the program documentation bullet, perhaps the SNAP program will be able to be used for SNAP within a social services list, like we have a Met list. We don't know this yet, but we want to make sure that we're thinking about alternate uses. Hi, hello, Nicole. Yes. And I want to thank Nicole's an expert from 2-in-1. Hello, thank you so much for coming in. And then Lucy, nice note. Again, so grateful for all of the experts in classification who are helping us. So these requirements make sense to everybody. Again, this is a kickoff. The whole point is to orient to the work ahead. And then next week, 2 weeks, we come back to you with some of our first findings. All right, the next slide. So this one is, we haven't solidified on this. We keep on like floating it around. There's some things that we just float around and then we haven't landed yet. Like one of them is, I'm not going to, well, you'll hear more about the next one of them later, the next meeting. So we think this is going to be the case, but we just like are trying to figure out what that means. And this is why it's under consideration that the structure of the classification will be published in open format for use. We know we're going to put it somewhere. We just don't know the method yet. And so that's why we're trying to figure that out. Is it going to be on the Confluence? Is it going to be in schema.org? Is it going to be a BSAC value set? Is it going to be published in HL7? Is it going to be a SNOMED? But who knows, right? There's some things that we're trying, like we just, some ideas we have. But as we craft, we're working on the structure first and having side conversations about possibilities. And again, everything you see here is a possibility. We have already had like months and months of meetings with people talking about possible methods of publishing. So as we figure out the structure and it's, the levels of the classification, we'll figure out where we want to publish it. But this is just a requirement under consideration. Next slide. Next steps. Bye. We're almost done. The next steps is where we come in with our normal process, identify and review. So next meeting, we're to come back and present the initial classification with rationale and for the rationale that supports the structure. Your job as a community to review the classification and thinking about that evidence slide. It's really about that function, right? So we're reviewing a classification that's the marrying of classifications that have been refined over time for function. So comments, we need to be like from the point of analysis of function, right? Subject matter experts vet comments and revise the classification. That's the way it goes. And then we work a consensus process toward the public vote. Go team. This is, again, this should look very similar. The primary difference is the type of evidence, which is why we had a slide to it. We good? Okay. Next slide. Woohoo! Any questions? Welcome to fun new work, supporting implementer needs, exciting brain melding and creating work. I want to thank all the subject matter experts who came. You're all here. I'm really grateful. You not all of you talked, but all of you are here, and we could not do this without you. So grateful. Any other final thoughts from SMEs before we head into next steps? Besides go team. We're grateful for you all. I hope I did you all justice, and you'll be on the hook next time more. I promise. Next slide. All right, so next steps, next slide. So the general is catching up on needed materials and recordings on Gravity Project Materials Confluence page. Next slide. The one thing I realized, I suddenly realized we didn't put this in, that there is there's a new tree, a new spot in, I think maybe Sarah Bahal put it in. We had to create a new section of the Confluence to support this work. And that's where all of the findings and evidence will be. So I think, to Sarah Bahal, did you put a link to that in there? I don't think our slide didn't get updated. I forgot that part.
No, we don't have a slide, but I can drop a link into the chat and we can also follow up via email.
That sounds great. Yeah, it's just, and again, I can even like show you, but for anyone who's ever been involved in the work, you look at the work in progress and the subject matter experts and the evidence on the Confluence page under social risk domain build or social risk terminology build. Here we go. Yeah. And so if you go to terminology workstream, the next caret up under cross domain build, Hamal, you're amazing. You can see program classification, right? So this is where you'll find the materials, right? So the references I mentioned, the list of programs, any hyperlinks to open classifications, any materials on classification, any, the spreadsheets to look at what we're doing, all of that's going to be here. No homework yet. But this is we had to build a cross-domain build section because this is not just one domain. Does that part make sense? No homework yet. But the materials that I mentioned will be here shortly, like the master professions and programs list. Our subject matter experts are here. Anything else? I think we're good. So we can go back, and then that was the last slide was just the slide talking about the meetings, right? So terminology here again, because of the uniqueness of the work, we might create a special space to keep on to have this conversation, so it doesn't merge into or confuse the terminology domain work. Technical work stream every other week, Wednesdays 1 to 2. Implementation. Next meeting is on resources, open resource to support implementation of Gravity, terminology, and tech. If you have an open resource, let us know. We're going to be presenting what we have. As much as it's summer and I'm usually not in public meetings, it's really good to see you all again. And I'm really excited about this really innovative work, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Any other final thoughts before we close? Stay dry. Thank you all. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll start presenting the work that everyone's been doing, all these subject matter experts since May 16th. And thank you, Smeets, for coming. I really appreciate your wisdom. Bye.